Many say the First World War started in 1914, but what if I told you it really began over 150 years earlier?
The 7 Years' War is by some considered the real First World War. But what were the causes of this monumental conflict and how did it change the course of history forever? The 7 Years' War was fought between 1756 and 1763. It rooted in decades of political tensions, colonial rivalry and shifting alliances. Before the war erupted, the world saw significant developments. The rise of Prussia under Frederick the Great as a formidable military power, or Austria's attempts to regain Silesia during the War of the Austrian Succession. The expansion of European colonial empires into contested territories in North America, Africa, or even Asia. Globally, powers like Britain, France, and Spain were jostling for dominance in lucrative trade routes, while local resistance movements added to the volatility. These disputes created a barrel of tensions just waiting to explode into a full-scale war. The alliances that shaped the war were forged in the diplomatic revolution of 1756, a significant shift in European power dynamics. France and Austria, traditional enemies, allied against Britain and Prussia, altering centuries-old relationships. These alliances set the stage for one of the largest and most complex conflicts the world has ever seen. In Europe, the war began with Prussia's bold invasion of Saxony in 1756. Frederick the Great, one of the era's most brilliant military commanders, faced a coalition that included Austria, France, Russia, and Sweden. Despite being vastly outnumbered, with Prussia fielding around 200,000 troops against a combined force exceeding 500,000 soldiers, Frederick's tactic genius was evident in battles like Rossbach and Leuthen. At Rossbach, his army of 22,000 men decisively defeated 42,000 French and Austrian troops in less than 2 hours. Yet, the war also saw moments of near disaster, such as the Russian advances into Prussian territory and the occupation of Berlin in 1760. Frederick's ability to maneuver his forces and exploit enemy weaknesses ensured that Prussia avoided total collapse. In 1762, the war took a dramatic turn with the death of Empress Elizabeth of Russia. Her successor, Peter III, admired Frederick the Great and withdrew Russia from the war, signing a peace treaty. This unexpected shift, known as the Miracle of the House of Brandenburg, saved Prussia from annihilation and allowed it to recover lost ground. In North America, known as the French and Indian War, the conflict erupted over territorial disputes in the Ohio River Valley, a region critical for its fertile lands and fur trade. Early French victories, such as the capture of Fort Oswego in 1756, gave them the upper hand. However, British leadership under William Pitt shifted the tide. The 1759 Battle of Quebec, where General James Wolfe's force defeated the French under the Marquis de Montcalm, marked a turning point. The siege involved over 8,000 British troops and saw nearly 2,000 casualties on both sides. By 1760, the British had captured Montreal, effectively ending French control in North America. Native American alliances played a pivotal role in this theater. Tribes like the Iroquois Confederacy sided with the British, while others, including the Algonquin and the Huron, supported the French. These alliances were often pragmatic, shaped by promises of trade, land, or protection. The war's devastation left many indigenous communities weakened and their futures uncertain. The turning point came with the British Prime Minister William Pitt's commitment to funding the war effort. This financial and logistical support enabled the British to launch a series of successful campaigns, culminating in the capture of key French strongholds, including Louisbourg and Montreal. The 7 Years' War also extended to India, a crucial theater for control over trade and territory once again. The decisive Battle of Plassey in 1757, led by Robert Clive, was fought with 3,000 British forces against 50,000 under the Nawab of Bengal. Clive's strategic use of alliances and betrayal within the Nawab's ranks led to a swift British victory, securing Bengal and its immense wealth for the East India Company. Other critical engagements, such as the Siege of Pondicherry in 1761, further solidified British dominance in southern India. The war in India wasn't just a European clash, it deeply involved Indian states like the Marathas and Mysore, reshaping regional politics and setting the stage for British colonial rule. The naval aspect of the 7 Years' War was critical, as control of these seas dictated the outcome of colonial struggles. Britain's Royal Navy blockaded French ports, cutting off crucial supplies to their overseas territories. Key battles like the Battle of Quiberon Bay in 1759, where Britain decisively defeated the French fleet, ensured British dominance at sea. This superiority allowed Britain to capture French islands like Guadeloupe and Martinique, which were vital for their sugar production. The capture of Havana in 1762, a Spanish stronghold, further demonstrated British naval strength, as it involved over 20,000 troops and nearly 200 ships in a complex operation that crippled Spanish defenses in the Caribbean. The Caribbean islands were economic powerhouses at that time, producing sugar that was as valuable as gold in the 18th century. Control of these islands meant immense wealth and strategic leverage, further fueling the ferocity of the naval campaigns. The Caribbean conflict also sheds light on the darker aspects of the war. These sugar-rich territories relied heavily on enslaved African labor, with the human cost often overshadowing the economic gains. The naval battles fought for these islands indirectly prolonged the suffering of millions. The war was also one of the costliest conflicts of its time. Britain alone spent an estimated £161 million, equivalent to approximately 225 billion in today's currency, adjusted for inflation and economic growth. France too faced financial ruin, with expenditures pushing the nation towards economic crisis, a factor that contributed to the French Revolution just decades later. Logistics played a critical role in the war, as it always does. Armies required a vast amount of supplies, including food, ammunition, and medical care. For example, British forces in North America relied heavily on transatlantic shipments, which often have been disrupted by French privateers, which added to the logistical challenge. Also, it just took a long time, if you would think, shipping troops and all these supplies from Britain over to North America. Casualties were immense, with estimates suggesting over 1 million soldiers and civilians died as a direct result of the war. Disease, starvation, and battlefield injuries claimed lives at an unprecedented scale. In the naval theater alone, thousands perished due to scurvy and other ailments exacerbated by long voyages. The war also disrupted economies. Farmers and merchants faced ruin as their lands and businesses were destroyed. In North America and India, local economies were left shattered by the prolonged military campaigns, and the financial burden of the war would spark future conflicts, including revolutions. The 7 Years' War was a truly global conflict, involving numerous nations, kingdoms, and indigenous people from around the world. Here a small list of all the participants: Great Britain, France, Prussia, Austria, Russia, Spain, Portugal, Sweden, Hanover, Saxony, indigenous tribes in North America, Indian kingdoms, and the Mughal Empire. As you can see, many nations have been involved in this conflict, and this is one of the points where historians say the 7 Years' War was the first global war. It wasn't confined to one region or continent, since it involved battles on 5 continents, and affected, like I said before, every major power of the 18th century. This conflict marked the first time that wars in Europe, North America, the Caribbean, India, and Africa were all interconnected. The war's global scope was unprecedented. European powers used their colonies to found and fight the war, while local forces such as Native American tribes and Indian kingdoms were pulled into the struggle. It was a war not only for empires, but for economics, cultures, and global trade networks. The 7 Years' War paved the way for the interconnected conflicts that define the modern concept of world wars. In India, the British East India Company solidified its dominance, leading to the establishment of the British Raj. The groundwork laid during the 7 Years' War allowed Britain to control vast swathes of the subcontinent, impacting Indian society and economy for centuries. The conflicts and rivalries forged during the 7 Years' War would later resurface in the Napoleonic Wars, as France and Britain continued their struggle for global supremacy. These wars would dominate the late 18th and 19th centuries, further shaping the modern world. It marked the rise of Britain as the world's preeminent power, the decline of France's colonial empire, and the realignment of global politics and economics that would echo through history. The 7 Years' War was the crucible in which the modern world was forged. Its legacy is a reminder of how interconnected and far-reaching history can be. It was more than the clash of armies. It was a turning point in history, and it would reshape empires, economies, and societies. What other moments in history deserve to be talked about more? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to support the channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. And as always, this is HistoryCrafts, where history crafts itself.